October 28, 2016, Denver District Court. A high-ranking member of one of America's most dangerous motorcycle clubs was about to learn his fate. Philip Duran, known to his brothers as Bandido Fee, sat in the courtroom wearing an ankle monitor, waiting for his sentencing on charges that could put him away for decades. But Philip Duran had other plans. In a moment that would shock law enforcement and make headlines across the country, Duran calmly walked out of the courthouse during a recess, cutting off his ankle bracelet as he disappeared into the Denver streets. The National Sergeant-at-Arms of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club had just pulled off one of the most brazen courthouse escapes in recent memory. This wasn't just any criminal. This was a man who authorities said helped run a $1 million drug operation that stretched across multiple states. The escape was the final chapter in a story that began 2 years earlier, when federal agents launched Operation Tick and Flea Collar, an investigation that would expose the darkest secrets of the Bandidos' financial network and bring down some of their most powerful leaders. The club behind the operation. To understand this drug operation, you need to know what the Bandidos really are. Founded in 1966 in San Leon, Texas, by dock worker Donald Eugene Chambers, the Bandidos Motorcycle Club grew from a small group of Houston-area bikers into one of the world's largest outlaw motorcycle organizations. By 2014, the Bandidos had become a global organization, with over 2,500 members spread across 303 chapters in 22 countries. They were the fourth largest motorcycle club in the world. Law enforcement agencies classified them as an organized crime group. The club's members called themselves one-percenters, meaning 99% of motorcyclists are law-abiding citizens, and they were the other 1%, the outlaws who live by their own rules. Their insignia, known as the Fat Mexican, showed a cartoon bandit holding a machete in one hand and a pistol in the other. Their motto was simple: "We are the people our parents warned us about." According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the Bandidos were involved in drug dealing, arms trafficking, money laundering, and other crimes. The FBI estimated that outlaw motorcycle clubs collected over $1 billion in illegal income annually. In Colorado, the Bandidos had built a strong presence. The Denver Westside chapter had become a key hub in a drug network that moved methamphetamine across state lines. The three leaders. At the center of this operation were three men who held some of the highest positions in the Bandidos structure. Philip Lee Duran, age 42, was known as Bandido Fee. As the National Sergeant-at-Arms, Duran held one of the most powerful positions in the entire organization. His job was to enforce club rules and maintain discipline. But according to investigators, Duran was using his position to run a drug trafficking operation across multiple states. Michael Derek Menson, age 46, went by Bandido Tick. As another National Sergeant-at-Arms, Menson worked closely with Duran to coordinate the club's criminal activities. Law enforcement described him as a key figure in the drug distribution network. Lorenzo Luis Sojo, age 41, was the president of the Bandidos Denver Westside chapter. In outlaw motorcycle clubs, chapter presidents control their territories. Sojo's chapter had become the operational center of the drug operation. These three men had figured out how to turn the Bandidos' reputation into money. This wasn't street-level drug dealing. This was organized crime that used the motorcycle club structure to move large quantities of methamphetamine across state lines, clean the money through banks, and traffic firearms to other criminal organizations. Operation Tick and Flea Collar begins September 2014. The Colorado Attorney General's Office and the Metro Gang Task Force began noticing something troubling. High-ranking Bandidos members were living far beyond what their legitimate jobs should have allowed. Expensive motorcycles, luxury cars, and lifestyles that didn't match their day jobs. Reports suggested the Denver Westside chapter had become the center of a major drug network, but proving it would require a complex undercover operation. The investigation was codenamed Operation Tick and Flea Collar, named after the nicknames of two primary targets, Bandido Tick and Bandido Fee. What began as routine surveillance quickly revealed the scope of what authorities were dealing with. Federal agents from the DEA, FBI, and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives joined the investigation. They used wiretaps, undercover officers, and surveillance to penetrate the secretive world of the Bandidos. What they discovered was shocking. The three Bandidos leaders had created a criminal operation that worked like a legitimate business. Instead of selling products, they were moving methamphetamine. Instead of profit reports, they tracked drug seizures and police raids. The organization had connections with wholesale distributors in California who could provide massive quantities of methamphetamine. These drugs were then transported to Colorado, where Duran, Menson, and Sojo would distribute them throughout the Denver area using mid-level dealers. But the drugs were just the beginning. Investigators discovered the Bandidos were also trafficking firearms across state lines. They would buy weapons in states with weak gun laws, then ship them to criminal organizations in cities like Las Vegas, where they could be sold for big profits. The money cleaning operation was equally advanced. Instead of simply hiding cash, the Bandidos were using banks and money transfer services to make their drug money look legitimate. They would make small deposits across multiple accounts, use wire transfers to move money between states, and invest in legitimate businesses to hide where their wealth came from. The financial web. As Operation Tick and Flea Collar progressed, investigators began to understand the true scope of the Bandidos' financial network. This wasn't just a local drug operation. It was a multi-state criminal business that moved millions of dollars annually. The money trail started in California, where the Bandidos had relationships with major methamphetamine suppliers. These weren't small-time dealers. These were wholesale distributors who could provide pounds of high-quality methamphetamine at a time. Philip Duran, using his position as National Sergeant-at-Arms, coordinated these purchases. His authority within the club gave him access to suppliers who might not trust lower-ranking members. The Bandidos' fearsome reputation also meant that suppliers knew they would be paid or face serious consequences. Once the drugs arrived in Colorado, Lorenzo Sojo's Denver West Side chapter became the distribution hub. Sojo had built a network of mid-level dealers who could move large quantities of methamphetamine throughout the Denver area. These weren't random drug dealers. They were carefully selected associates who understood the consequences of crossing the Bandidos. Michael Menson handled much of the logistics, coordinating shipments, managing the money, and ensuring that the operation ran smoothly. His role as National Sergeant-at-Arms gave him the authority to resolve disputes and maintain discipline within the organization. Rather than simply hiding cash in safes or storage units, the Bandidos were using the legitimate banking system to clean their money. They would make deposits just under the federal reporting threshold of $10,000, use multiple accounts across different banks, and wire money to associates in other states. They bought legitimate businesses that could serve as fronts for their illegal income. The weapons trafficking operation was particularly dangerous because it put military-grade weapons in the hands of other criminal organizations. Assault rifles, handguns, and explosives were moved through the Bandidos network, contributing to violence in cities across the American West. The investigation intensifies. By early 2015, Operation Tick and Flea Collar had gathered enough evidence to move against the Bandidos' leadership. But investigators wanted more than just drug charges. They wanted to use the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act to dismantle the entire operation. The breakthrough came when federal agents infiltrated the Bandidos' communication networks. Using wiretaps and electronic surveillance, they recorded conversations that revealed the full scope of the operation. In one recorded conversation, Philip Duran discussed purchasing several pounds of methamphetamine from California suppliers. The conversation included details about pricing, quality, and delivery methods that left no doubt about what was being discussed. Another wiretap captured Michael Menson coordinating the shipment of loaded firearms to Las Vegas. The conversation included specific details about the types of weapons being shipped, the criminal organizations that would receive them, and the profits that would be generated. Lorenzo Sojo was recorded discussing money-cleaning techniques with associates. The conversation revealed how the Bandidos were using legitimate businesses to hide their drug money, and how they were coordinating with corrupt financial professionals to move money across state lines. But perhaps the most damaging evidence came when investigators discovered the full scope of the Bandidos' violence and intimidation tactics. Outlaw motorcycle clubs are known for using violence to maintain control, but the Bandidos had turned violence into a business tool. Associates who failed to pay debts were threatened with serious physical harm. Rival drug dealers who came into Bandidos' territory were beaten or worse. Even law enforcement officers were targeted for intimidation if they interfered with club business. The investigation also revealed connections between the Bandidos and other criminal organizations. They had relationships with Mexican drug cartels, organized crime families, and international money-cleaning operations. By late 2014, investigators had compiled enough evidence to support dozens of charges against the three Bandidos leaders. But they continued the investigation for several more months, hoping to gather evidence against the broader criminal network. The takedown, January 28, 2015. The Colorado Attorney General's office was ready to strike. In coordinated raids across the Denver area, federal agents and local police moved against the Bandidos' leadership. The raids were carefully planned to maximize the evidence seized while minimizing the risk to law enforcement officers. The Bandidos were known to be heavily armed and willing to use violence against police, so every precaution was taken. At Philip Duran's residence, agents seized evidence of the money-cleaning operation, including bank records, wire transfer receipts, and communications with corrupt financial professionals. They also found weapons and drug equipment that supported the trafficking charges. Michael Menson's home revealed the logistics of the operation. Agents found shipping records for firearms, communications with California drug suppliers, and detailed financial records that showed how the organization tracked its illegal profits. Lorenzo Sojo's residence contained evidence of the distribution network, including customer lists, drug trafficking equipment, and communications with mid-level dealers throughout the Denver area. But perhaps the most significant seizure was the drugs and money found during the raids. Investigators confiscated approximately 2.5 pounds of methamphetamine with a street value of $40,000. They also seized $175,000 in assets, including cash, vehicles, and other property bought with drug money. 8 people were indicted as part of Operation Tick and Flea Collar. In addition to the 3 Bandidos leaders, charges were filed against Hugo Vaca, Nicholas Murillo, Julia Ann Nicole Linebarger, Erica Navarrete, and Zacharia Bengashir, associates who had played supporting roles in the operation. The charges were serious. All 3 Bandidos leaders faced violations of the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act, which carries penalties similar to federal RICO charges. They were also charged with drug trafficking, money cleaning, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy. The legal aftermath. The legal proceedings that followed the arrests revealed just how organized the Bandidos' criminal operation had become. During plea negotiations, prosecutors laid out evidence that painted a picture of an organization that operated more like a corporation than a traditional criminal outfit. All 3 Bandidos leaders ultimately decided to plead guilty rather than face trial. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and the potential sentences under the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act were severe. Michael Menson, known as Bandido Tick, was the first to be sentenced. In November 2016, he received 24 years in prison, one of the longest sentences ever imposed on a Bandidos member for drug trafficking. The judge noted that Menson's position as National Sergeant-at-Arms made him particularly responsible for the organization's crimes. Lorenzo Sojo, the Denver Westside chapter president, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Prosecutors argued that his leadership role in the local chapter made him directly responsible for much of the drug distribution that occurred in the Denver area. The sentences sent a clear message to other outlaw motorcycle clubs. Law enforcement agencies were no longer treating these organizations as simple motorcycle enthusiasts who occasionally broke the law. They were recognizing them as organized criminal operations that deserved serious prison time. But the most dramatic moment in the legal proceedings was yet to come. Philip Duran, the National Sergeant-at-Arms known as Bandido Fee, was scheduled to be sentenced on October 28, 2016. As the highest-ranking member of the organization and the alleged mastermind of the drug trafficking operation, he faced the most serious charges and the longest potential sentence. Duran had been released on bond with an ankle monitor while awaiting sentencing. The electronic monitoring device was supposed to ensure he appeared in court and didn't flee. But Philip Duran had not achieved his position in the Bandidos by following rules. The Great Escape. October 28, 2016, started like any other sentencing hearing at the Denver District Court. Philip Duran arrived wearing his court-ordered ankle monitor, accompanied by his attorney and prepared to learn his fate. The hearing proceeded normally at first. Prosecutors outlined the evidence against Duran, describing his role as the leader of a criminal operation that had moved millions of dollars worth of drugs across multiple states. They argued for a sentence that would reflect the seriousness of his crimes and his position within the Bandidos structure. Duran's defense attorney argued for leniency, pointing to his client's cooperation with authorities and his lack of a significant prior criminal record. But everyone in the courtroom knew that the charges under the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act carried serious penalties. Then came the recess. During what should have been a routine break in the proceedings, Philip Duran walked out of the courthouse. Somehow, he had managed to cut off his ankle monitor without triggering an immediate alarm. By the time court security realized what had happened, the National Sergeant-at-Arms of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club had vanished into the streets of Denver. The escape was audacious, even by outlaw motorcycle club standards. Duran had calmly walked out of a federal courthouse while facing decades in prison, cutting off a court-ordered monitoring device in the process. It was the kind of brazen act that would become legendary within the outlaw motorcycle community. Law enforcement immediately launched a massive manhunt. Duran was considered armed and extremely dangerous, with connections to criminal organizations across multiple states and internationally. The FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, and local police all joined the search. Crime Stoppers offered a $2,000 reward for information leading to Duran's capture. His photograph was distributed to law enforcement agencies across the country, and airports and border crossings were alerted to watch for the fugitive Bandidos leader. But Philip Duran had simply disappeared. Despite the massive manhunt, one of the highest-ranking members of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club remained at large, a living symbol of the organization's defiance of law enforcement and their willingness to do whatever it takes to avoid justice. Massive manhunt. Duran was considered armed and extremely dangerous, with connections to criminal organizations across multiple states and even internationally. The FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, and local police all joined the search. But Philip Duran had simply disappeared. Despite the massive manhunt, one of the highest-ranking members of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club remained at large, a living symbol of the organization's defiance of law enforcement and their willingness to do whatever it takes to avoid justice. The escape marked the end of Operation Tick and Flea, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing war between law enforcement and outlaw motorcycle clubs. Conclusion and impact operation. Tick and Flea accomplished something that many thought was impossible. It dismantled the leadership structure of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the American West. The investigation proved that outlaw motorcycle clubs were not just groups of rebels playing at being criminals, but sophisticated criminal enterprises capable of moving millions of dollars across international borders. The financial impact was significant. The $40,000 in drugs and $175,000 in assets seized during the raids represented just a fraction of the money the Bandidos had made through their criminal activities. But by disrupting their distribution network and removing their leadership, investigators estimated they had prevented millions of dollars in future drug sales. The sentences imposed on Michael Menson and Lorenzo Soyo, 24 years and 20 years respectively, were among the longest ever given to outlaw motorcycle club members for drug trafficking. These sentences established important legal precedents and showed that law enforcement was serious about treating these organizations as the criminal enterprises they truly were. But perhaps the most important impact of Operation Tick and Flea was what it revealed about the evolution of outlaw motorcycle clubs. The Bandidos weren't just tough guys on motorcycles anymore. They were sophisticated criminals who used modern financial systems, international supply chains, and corporate-style organization structures to build criminal empires worth millions of dollars. The investigation also demonstrated the effectiveness of multi-agency cooperation in combating organized crime. The Colorado Attorney General's Office, Metro Gang, Task Force FBI, DEA, and ATF had worked together seamlessly to build cases that could withstand the scrutiny of federal court. As for Philip Duran, the escaped National Sergeant-at-Arms remained a fugitive and a symbol of the Bandidos' defiance. His dramatic courthouse escape became part of outlaw motorcycle club folklore, but it also served as a reminder that these organizations would stop at nothing to protect their criminal enterprises. The war between law enforcement and outlaw motorcycle clubs continues to this day. But Operation Tick and Flea Collar proved that no criminal organization, no matter how sophisticated or well-connected, is beyond the reach of justice. The million-dollar drug empire that brought down Bandido's leadership was gone, but the methods used to destroy it would serve as a blueprint for future investigations into organized crime. The Bandidos Motorcycle Club still exists, but they know that law enforcement is watching, waiting, and ready to strike again. The next time they try to build a criminal empire, investigators will be ready.